Ah,
No, there we go. Nope. All right, we're good. All right, awesome. Three, two, and one. Hey, Dave Molenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. As always, I had this question, and today it's around this word, and the word is called burnout. And so I want to ask you, how do you define burnout? Do you define it as a reduction of fuel to nothing? That's one way to look at it. Or a failure of an electrical device through overheating? That might be another way. Or physical or mental collapse caused by overwork or stress. And I don't know about you, but I see a lot of people that are like teetering on burnout. So I wanted to get the expert today. So I'm honored to be hanging out with Jimmy Burroughes. How are you, my friend?
I'm so great. Thanks, Dave, for asking. And yes, I'm definitely into this topic, so I'm excited to be here.
That's awesome. We're going to put aside the reduction of fuel and the failure of an electrical device. So we are going to focus on this physical or mental collapse caused by overwork or stress. Now, that's kind of how I, um, define this, Jimmy. How do you define that for yourself?
It's a really good question, and I think before we define what it is, I think we also need to define what it isn't, because burnout's become a bit of a uh, go-to term that people, it was really cool in the 90s and 2000s to be super busy and really, really working hard. Now it's seen as the word of the day is, oh, I'm just burning out. I'm burned out. I'm really burned out right now. And the reality is a lot of people who think they're burned out are actually just stressed out or tired out or worn out. The And so not mistaking those things with burnout is in my mind really key to getting a clear picture of what burnout
Sure,
actually is.
sure.
And so the way we really simply define burnout is when your accountability exceeds your ability to be
Mm,
successful. So we can break that down a little bit. Your accountability is the number of tasks you have to do, the responsibilities you have, the number of things that are drawing on your energy and time and available capacity. And what we see with a lot of people who burn out is they have excessive accountabilities. So they might have a family who have a lot of demands on their time. They're not sleeping well. They're not getting the restorative piece in place. But they've also got a team who are maybe not performing or delivering as well as they might. So they're trying to fill the gaps by stepping in and maybe doing a little bit extra here and there, not delegating because they feel like they can do it better themselves. And so they're taking on this extra accountability. And then maybe they've also got a boss who is maybe not replacing staff who are leaving, asking an awful lot of you, and adding extra tasks on because we're a little bit behind on the target. So if you could just stay a little bit longer and work a bit more and do some extra things. So these are all the accountability things.
sure, sure.
And on the other side of the equation, we've got the ability. So the ability could be your skills, your time, your capacity, your resources, your energy. And if you can imagine, we've got this little equation going on. All of the accountability is really high, and you're like, I don't have the energy or the time or the resources or the people or the money or the budget or the energy to do all these things. So
Sure.
my accountability exceeds my ability. And this is where we start to see people burning out is when they overcommit for a long period of time, and as I think you described it perfectly, they just drain the energy bank account. They're just done,
Yeah,
and there's nothing
yeah.
left in the tank.
Well, and you bring up a really good point. And before I jump into that, I want to make sure that people know that you are the founder and CEO of JBL High Performance. And so we'll get into what that is a little bit. You're an expert, you've written books on this. So for people listening, definitely Jimmy knows what he's talking about. It's not just we decided today, hey, let's talk about this. He's an expert in this. So again, thanks for jumping on today. But you mentioned something that kind of I don't want to pass by, and I wrote it down, and I just want to get clarification because I felt like when you mentioned family, I guess my blind spot here was thinking that burnout was just at work, but it can actually like transcend work and get into your personal life. So I almost feel like I can be burned out at work, but then I come home and I'm perfectly fine. I'm assuming those are pretty loose boundaries when it comes to all of a sudden my family's affecting this, my friends, maybe church connections, whatever you're volunteering, any of that stuff can kind of pile onto that. Is that accurate?
100%. And this has always been a thing, right? If we look back at the data, everybody thinks burnout suddenly become a concept that is affecting everybody since COVID. That's not really true. If we look at the statistics, if we look at the data, if we look at the research, this has been a steady decline over the last 15, 20 years. And there's a number of reasons for that. But essentially, this was already a thing before COVID. What COVID did was it integrated far more closely and blended your home and your work life. So, as you say, before you used to go to the office and that was work, and you would work really hard, and then you would come home and you would be with your family or your church group or your sports team or whatever it might be.
Right. Yep.
COVID smooshed those two together. And so, what we've encountered from a neuroscience perspective is the inability to delineate in many people's minds between commitments and cognitive stress. And so people have forgotten how to decompress. We call it downtime in our research, but essentially it's that ability to switch off. People have forgotten how to do that because they're so used to working at home, having an iPad on the couch next to them whilst they're texting and answering emails, and watching the TV at the same time while supervising the kids. There's so many things going on that we've just allowed to creep into our boundaries that now we're starting to see the consequences of that.
Wow. Well, and so you mentioned two words, downtime and decompress. And I don't know about you, Jimmy, but those are words that people think of as negative, right? Like there's all of a sudden this thought process that I shouldn't ever have downtime. Downtime's for when I'm sleeping, or downtime's for when I'm dead, right? You hear all these weird things, but that sure seems to be not the smartest way to look at this. So from a research and from your experience, how do we help people listening get a different like look at downtime and decompressing to where it's actually a good thing and something they look forward to?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much research in this, and we talk about quite a lot of it in the book. But I'll draw out some specific examples that might help us. We obviously the Paris Olympics are about to start, and many people are very excited about that. And if you look at the highest performers in the world, probably our Olympic athletes are some of those.
Hmm.
And but they don't compete 365 days a year. They compete in specific events that they train for, that they rest for, and then when
Sure.
they really need to perform, they go and do the event, whatever it is that they're competing in. But for some reason in business, we think that we're competing every day. So
Oh,
we book ourselves into 14 hours of meetings, 6 days a week.
yep.
And on Sundays, we're answering emails whilst sitting in the park with our kids, or thinking about who that meeting tomorrow while we're sat in church, or on the couch trying to sleep but anxious about something. We never get that downtime. So we're trying to act like an Olympic athlete on event day every day, and clearly that doesn't work. And what we also notice, and this is another really interesting piece of research, is that in your brain, we have two very distinct networks, cognitive networks. And if you think of them like two TV channels, so these two TV channels, we can only watch one of them at a time. So we don't have fancy picture-in-picture TVs in our brains. We have like the old school TVs where you're either watching channel one or you're watching channel two. And they're what called inversely correlated and mutually inhibitive. So when you choose channel one, channel two switches off. When you choose channel two, channel one switches off.
Sure.
Now, let's put a little bit more fruit into this. Channel one is our executive functioning channel. It's called the task processing network. And it's the one that we use day in, day out when we're trying to be a high performer, in inverted commas. It's the problem solving, planning, strategy, thinking part of our brain. And it's really busy all the time. It's really hungry for sugar. It creates lots of byproducts, biological byproducts,
Sure.
and it's also very energy intensive. So it's why you get tired. And if you think about your performance over the course of the day, you go into work fresh, you finish the day tired because you've used your task processing network consistently. The other channel, the one that we forget to use, is what's called a default mode network. And you could use the simple term for this is like our daydreaming channel. And Dave, let me ask you a question to kind of again to bring this to life. Have you ever
Sure.
been in the shower and solved a problem, or walking the dog and suddenly remembered the name of that actor in that movie that you were trying to recall? Have you ever had one
Absolutely.
of those types of
Yep, for
situations?
sure. Yep.
Yeah, so it's when we switch from our task processing network to our default mode network that these magical things start to happen. And what the research actually shows is that when we go into our default mode network, our daydreaming channel, it's like the janitors come into the other one and start tidying up. So whilst our task processing network channel is turned off, the janitors are cleaning up. They're sweeping away all of the excess byproducts, all of the mess. They're joining things up. They're tidying files up for you. And so when you go back into that network, you can perform better. Equally, while you're in your default mode network, in your daydreaming channel, you're starting to make linkages. You're starting to join the dots. You're starting to restore some of the chemical balances that are inside your brain. And so, without accessing that default mode network, you can't perform as highly as
Sure.
you think you can, because you're almost tying one arm behind your back. You know, some of these great problems are solved when people are half asleep. There's a state called theta sleep, which is where people have these great moments or great breakthroughs, and it's because they're in the default mode network. So if you're somebody who thinks I've got to be always on all the time, then
Yep.
actually you're depriving yourself of this opportunity to perform at your highest level. And we've got research that backs this up from Boston Consulting Group, from Eliud Kipchoge, the international marathon runner who was the first to break the 2 hours, from Harvard basketball league, where they split the team and they did control groups and groups that they forced to train as normal, and then they forced another group to, or asked another group, should I say, to rest and restore themselves. Every single
Mm,
time across every piece of research there is, the performance is always higher from people who take some downtime.
wow. Well, I tell you, it's interesting. So I'm a black and white thinker, Jimmy. So when I hear task mode or default mode, I think of like either one or the other, right? So it's like to me, it's really hard to find a way to do both because I wrote down right next to default mode like lazy because I'm feeling like, some people, we all know people that probably live in that default mode, right? And so we think, oh my gosh, I can't be that way. So I have to live in that task spot, which then turns to that burnout. And I think what I liked about the definition that I found was the word collapse, because I feel like it gets to a point where it's just so overwhelming. And so, how do you spot that from people? For somebody listening that is kind of, they've heard burnout, they kind of understand it, you're giving them a better insight, but they are like looking at themselves and asking, how do I spot that in myself? What are some things that might be in my life right now that might be pointing me that I might have that burnout?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and we've spent quite a bit of time thinking about this and trying to make it easy for people to grasp, because one of the things you'll probably come across in your own research about burnout is when you're close to burnout or when you're really struggling with it, your available cognitive brain power is pretty minimal. So we're like, how can we make this super easy? So we came up with a very simple framework, which is the vowels: A, E, I, O, U. And these are the signs that you might be burning out. And what we've discovered in our research analytics is if you've got three or more of these going on in your world, then chances are you're on the road to burnout and you need to take some actions. The other interesting piece, and before I get into the
Yeah.
AEIOU that we see here, is that burnout is generally a choice. You choose to burn out. You might not think you're choosing it, but you're choosing the actions which are taking you down that track. You're choosing to stay late at work. You're choosing to push yourself harder. You're choosing not to delegate. So when I say if you spot three of these or more and you're on the road to burnout, then it's time to start thinking about the choices that you're making. So
Gotcha.
let's quickly whip through the
Yeah.
framework AEIOU. The first one is anxious. You know, if I think back to when I was on my road to burnout and what led to 7 years on, what led to this point, anxiety was one of the pieces that I noticed consistently. So you wake up in the morning or waking up in the middle of the night, go, oh my God, that meeting tomorrow, I've not prepared enough for it. Or I've got so much to do. I can't believe how big my inbox is. I can't believe how long my task list is. That
Sure.
anxiety that's constantly there. And maybe that anxiety is also starting to manifest in the form of panic attacks or breathing challenges, maybe some physical symptoms. Certainly people we see who are very seriously into this state is they're actually starting to manifest physical symptoms of anxiety and panic.
Sure.
So anxiety is the first one.
Okay.
Second one is exhaustion. I remember in 2017 sitting on the edge of my bed. I probably had 2 hours sleep. I used to live on sort of 2 to 4 hours sleep a night as a GM, and I was so tired, and all I could think about was I need a couple of Coke Zeros to get me up and running. I've got to have some teas when I get to work, and I've got a long 14-hour day ahead of me before I get on a flight to China. And I'm just like, oh God, I don't know if I can do this today. I don't know if I can keep going. And so
Yeah.
that anxiety then that's there, followed by the exhaustion, that's where we
Sure.
start to see some rocky ground.
Okay.
Next one is isolation. So if you find yourself either doing it all alone, going, I can't delegate, I'm the only one who can do this, I'm the one who has to take care of all the problems and solve everything for everybody, and people are starting to leave as well, so the team keep resigning or you have to keep firing people, turnover's really high. Or equally in your personal life, you're starting to pull back from friends, pull back from hobbies. Maybe you quit going to the gym. You haven't had time to get to church. You haven't been to football training in a couple of weeks because you've just got too many things on. That isolation is another warning sign for
Sure.
us.
Sure. Okay.
Uh, the fourth one, O, is overwhelm. So, oh my God, like I can't believe how many things I have to do. How am I going to get it all done? I can't believe it. It's just so much. Those
Yeah.
types of phrases we hear so often. There's no way I can get through all my tasks, and even if I do try and get through it, I'm not sure that it's going to clear. It's going to make any difference because it's all going to be there again tomorrow. I'm just feeling so
Yeah.
panicked, and that racing heart and the feeling of complete overwhelm can really take over. And then our final one, which is the clincher really, is unmotivated. So it's when you actually stop caring. And that's one of the ones we really notice in people who are burned out. They've been through the anxiety, the exhaustion, the isolation, and the overwhelm. And then they've got to the point where I was, where it's like, I don't care anymore. Like I'm just done.
Yeah.
And this is probably the sign that is, if you have this one, you're like, I don't care anymore. Like whatever I do, it's not going to make a difference. Like I'm just going to
Yeah.
keep banging my head against the wall. My boss doesn't get it. My team don't
Yeah.
get it. Like, what's the point? That
Wow.
unmotivation is the final sign and symptom we see for people who are on the road to burnout.
Wow. Anxious, exhaustion, isolation, overwhelm, and unmotivated. I mean, those are like really powerful words, Jimmy. So two questions on that that just kind of pop in my head. Number one, if I'm a leader of a team, I feel like it's my responsibility to kind of watch my team for this. So, because I'm guessing there are people that are in these that don't know they're in them, that's their kind of blind spot where they're not really sure. So, do you feel like that's a leader's responsibility to really help their team with this?
Yeah, 100%. And there's two ways to go about it. The first one is we use a phrase, know your people like you know your business. So if you're running a business, whether it's a big business or a small business, you know your numbers, right? You know your profit and loss, you know your balance sheet, you know your cash
Yep.
flow, and
Yep.
you should know your people in the same way.
Yeah.
Who's staying late, whose kids are going through medical treatment right now, who's just lost their cat, who's a real gun, who's looking for a promotion. You should know your people. And so part of your job is to have, from our research, it's 10 to 15 minutes of meaningful connection with every single employee every week. So that could
Wow.
be a coaching conversation, it could be a coffee, it could be a walk, but it's that, hey, how are you doing conversation? What's going on in your world conversation? So you know your people. So the first piece is you should be looking for those signs and symptoms. And then what are they telling you? And are they painting a nice clown face on a really sad situation? That's pretty difficult though, because you're a busy
Yeah.
manager and you've got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
So the other half of the responsibility is just to share information like this. So
Sure.
we've just given you a really simple framework, AEIOU. You could put that on a PowerPoint slide, print it out and stick it on the wall and say, hey, is anybody experiencing any of these things? You could bring
Yeah.
it to the next team meeting and say, hey, everybody, score yourself 1 to 10 on
Yeah.
these, 1 being, I don't feel this at all, and 10, this is my life, 100% of the time. Let's have a look at our scores. Let's have a conversation about that. Let's talk
Sure.
about that. The sad news that I can share with you, Dave, though, is the leaders that probably really need to spend some time thinking about this are probably the ones that aren't listening to this podcast.
Sure.
And the ones that really care and want to do a good job are probably already paying attention to some of these things in their team
Right.
already. So
Yeah.
my job is to try and help people who are listening to podcasts like this to
Yeah.
have a new tool or a new framework that is simple to use and take to the team, and just say, hey, let's have a conversation about this.
Sure.
Let's just check in with each other, and encouraging team members to look horizontally as well. So, hey, are you noticing that Dave is
Yeah.
really struggling? Then hey, why don't you just let me know? Let's have a conversation with Dave about that.
Sure. Wow, that's awesome. I love those. I think the flip though too, I want to flip this because I'm sure somebody's listening right now, Jimmy, where it's like, you know what? Put on your big boy panties. It's called work. Suck it up and deal with it. You know, whatever their comment is, they're thinking in their mind right now, or they're talking to the radio right now or whatever. They're saying that's just the reality and then which we live in. So how do you help that person? Because that to me is like a bigger, more painful blind spot because they probably have high turnover. They probably have high stress. They probably have a bad customer experience. Their profit and loss is not where it needs to be, or their profit's not where it needs to be. So, how do you help that person that is thinking that right now, listening to our show?
Yeah, it's a really valid point. And if I think back to some of the clients we've worked with, and even to my own experience, now I'm an ex-army officer. I've worked in some of the highest paced environments in the world, both in the military and then in my corporate career in banking and FMCG and all sorts of these really high paced, high pressure environments. And from that experience, what I took away was this concept called the hidden factory. And the hidden factory is an idea that if you have a business, and let's say you've got a team of 5 people, and I say to you, what if you could unlock the performance of another person in your team at zero cost without having to hire anybody else? Or what if you have you've got 10 factories in your business making widgets? What if I could give you an 11th one with no cost and no investment, that output? And that's what we're talking about here. Everything we do acknowledges that, yes, this is work. Yes, this is your job to go do stuff. My job is to help you optimize and tune that engine to unlock the hidden factory.
Sure.
And so the idea here is you might think you're doing everything great, and the only way to get better results is to work harder. I'm here to tell you from the last 20 odd years of experience, that is a better way of doing it, which is actually thinking and changing the way you work, the way you lead, the way you run your life, the choices you make. And these are not significant changes either. Everything we do is very small and simple things. They're not necessarily easy, but they're very simple to do. And you can share them with anybody else in your environment, your world. So pull on your big boy boots, sure. Maybe it's time to start thinking about moving to the next level of leadership, about graduating to the next layer of the building, or the next bigger office, because you start to lead and act in a different way.
Right? Expand your horizon rather than micromanage, I guess, whatever the opposite of micromanage is. I think that's awesome. We're going to take a break, Jimmy. When we come back, I want to unpack this multitasking piece because there's some really power there. I like the connection between these two. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Sure.
Welcome back. I'm honored to be hanging out with Jimmy Burroughes, the founder and CEO of JBL High Performance, and an author, fellow podcaster. He's got a great book called Beat Burnout. There's another book called Escaping the Multitasking Trap. And I'm like, it's so funny. I don't know about you, but I run into so many people, Jimmy, that think multitasking is like a really good thing. They feel like it's a gift from above, and it gives me the ability. I mean, it's just crazy. My wife can drive and put makeup on and text and talk on the phone and change the radio and, pet the dog. She can do all this, and she thinks this is really a good thing. She doesn't listen to my show, so I don't have to worry about any backlash here. But it's just crazy what people think multitasking is a positive thing. And I remember one time watching something, and I wish I could find it, but they showed two guys next to each other, and their goals were to build a birdhouse and then to answer emails and answer calls. So one guy started building the birdhouse. When the phone rang, he stopped and then he answered the phone. And then when the email came in, he did that. And then the other guy built the birdhouse. Then he returned his calls, and then he did his emails. And they found that the guy that didn't multitask actually got done quicker. So I think that I love that you're using this in a book form. So share with us what your research is shared from a multitasking perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. The if I rewind the clock again, I think everything that I've ever created is based on some of the lessons and battle scars that I've earned the hard way. And let's face it, we all learn battle scars the hard way.
Yep.
But I was an expert multitasker. I was all over the place, as you say, building birdhouses while answering calls and writing emails, and probably 17 other things at once. And the reality is it's a prowess thing, right? So I'm an amazing multitasker. I can do so much at the same time. And I answer it with just one simple phrase, which is chase two rabbits, catch no rabbits. And that's the reality of multitasking when you break it down to its simplest level. And so the research that we did is all based around high performance. Everything we do is based around how do we perform higher? How do we unwind the things that are holding us back from being a high performer? And how do we amplify the things that are going to make us perform even higher? And multitasking kept on coming up as one thing that people believed made them a high performer, but was actually holding them back from high performance.
Okay.
And there's a couple of reasons. And we did some research over 3 or 4 years, but the example that we used in the book was working with the CEO of a pretty significant organization called Michael, who asked us to share our story based on the work we did with him. So the Escape the Multitasking Trap is a short book, but it's based on essentially Michael's story, moving from a multitasking expert to a monotasking expert, which is the opposite of multitasking. And the research showed that there were kind of 4 key impacts of multitasking that people maybe realize but aren't really paying attention to. And the reality of multitasking is you're not actually doing things at the same time. The reality of multitasking is it's like the old, remember in the 80s we had those old cassette decks where with 2 tapes side by side? And the reality is you've got these 2 tapes in your cassette deck and you press play on one of them. But then you decide you want to listen to the other one. So you have to press stop and then you press play on the other one. And that takes a bit of a time. Mm-hmm. And if you keep doing that, the tapes gradually get stretched and damaged and the audio quality starts to decline. And we found the same thing with multitasking. When you actually switch tasks in multitasking, your brain has to stop something.
Okay.
Press stop on that cassette deck, move to the new cassette deck and press play. Yeah. And we think we can do that pretty well. So let's run an experiment and we'll see, Dave, if you're an expert multitasker or not. All right. So okay. Could you please give me the first 5 letters of the alphabet?
A, B, C, D, and E.
Cool. And now could you give me the first 5 numbers?
1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Perfect. Now, can you give me the last 5 numbers of the alphabet?
The last 5 numbers? There are no numbers.
Last 5 letters, sorry, of the alphabet.
Oh, there you go. W, X, Y, and Z, and I only did 4. So yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay. No, I forgot what's before W.
A little bit more complicated the task, right? We just amped up the complication. All right. Yep. And can you give me, and we're going to work on the basis it's 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, sure. Right? That's our last 5 numbers. So what I'd like you to do now is go in reverse, and I'd like you to alternate between them. So it's going to be Z, 26, and so on. Can you do that for me?
No. I couldn't even start. Z26, Y25. Yeah, no, because you're no. I mean, yeah, I could do it, but it's going to be an afternoon project, so I can't multitask like that. So I'm not good at that.
Yeah. So this is the reality, right? When it's a very simple task, sure, you can switch between them and it doesn't take a lot of cognitive energy.
Right.
But when we dial up the complication, and you've
Yeah.
known those letters since you were probably 2 years old. You've known those
Yep.
numbers since you were
Yep.
probably 2 years old. And all I've asked you to do is go backwards and alternate between the two. It's not a very complicated task, but it's still too complicated for your brain to do quickly.
For
And it
sure.
takes a lot of energy. That's the reality of your executive lifestyle. If you're running a business, leading a team, starting an organization, whatever it might be, your stage of life is a bit more complicated than just numbers and letters. So this cognitive overload is the first sign and symptom we see as a disadvantage of multitasking. If you just put all of your energy into one task, if I'd have said, hey, can you write the alphabet for me backwards? You would have got it done in probably less than a minute.
Right.
If I ask you to do it alternately, verbally, there's a lot of processing that's got to go on there, and so we're seeing this cognitive overload is one of the things that really takes its toll. And if we go back to our previous conversation around task processing network, we're really stretching that task processing network. The challenge of that is we start to get a little bit tired. We're getting a lot of burned sugar inside our brain, inside the capillaries and veins and arteries inside our brain. There's a lot of byproducts. We're starting to slow down. Those byproducts actually inhibit thinking. And one of the core consequences of that is decision deterioration. So we actually start to make worse decisions because we're trying to switch between two tasks or three or four or five tasks. We're making decisions that tend to be the easiest or the gut feel decisions because we're switching so quickly. We're not taking time to engage our slow thinking. We're just using fast thinking, which is intuitive. And I'm just going to go with my gut and we'll just make it work. It's fine.
Sure.
So decision deterioration is the next one. Then you start to bring in the people who work for you. And so you're saying to everybody, okay, everybody, we're going to focus on letters today. Right, today we're going to focus on numbers. But before lunch, we're going to focus on letters again.
Yeah.
And also, I want you to do colors. And you can imagine how your team is starting to see this scattered approach from you as a leader. They were like, hold on, but I thought we were focusing on numbers today. No, we're going to focus on colors and numbers and letters as well. And probably we're going to do some shapes. It starts to really undermine and erode your authority as a leader because they're like, well, hold on. Jimmy's all over the place. He keeps starting new things. And I thought we were all working on this. And so I've kind of put that cassette in my mind and I'm geared up ready for colors. And Jimmy's coming in with shapes and numbers. What's going on? And that can cause a real challenge for you. And then the final one is a communication breakdown. And this is very interesting because it was almost like Michael was streaming consciousness because he'd be on a task for 5-10 minutes and he'd send an email about something and then he'd send another email about something, then he'd have a corridor conversation with somebody about something else and he'd go, but I just remembered that first thing I was doing, I need to update everybody on that. And so just the sheer volume of communications that he was creating was not only very time intensive for him, it was very demanding for everybody else. And it felt scattered again. People were unsure because they were like, well, hold on, again, I thought we were really focusing on this, but now you've asked another question. And what Michael discovered and what we sort of saw happen as we did this case study with him was that when he consciously slowed down, when he consciously said, okay, the only thing we're doing today is this, and I know I've got to do all those other things, so I'm going to put them into the most important bucket for the rest of the week. But today, I really want to focus our energy, our time, our cognitive effort, and our results commitment on this one thing. It's how are we going to build a better widget? And let's just stay here until we've solved this problem. And I know there's lots of other stuff going on, but this is the most important thing. So multitasking is a bit of it's a dangerous place to go because you become the hamster on the wheel. And the more you multitask, the faster you're running on the wheel. And we all know what happens. The faster you run on the wheel, the faster the wheel goes and the faster we need to run. So multitasking is not helping you. The key is start to monotask, slow down the pace, and that gives you this great opportunity to be really considered and impactful, which leads to high performance.
Sure. Oh my gosh. So I missed one. So and maybe I'm the only one, but you had cognitive overload, you had
Yep.
decision deterioration. What was the third one?
Team turmoil, and
Team
then
turmoil.
communication breakdown.
Okay, team turmoil. Awesome. So, that's where it's so interesting because I feel like um as we start to land the plane today, I feel like I'm sorry, team turn, what was the second word?
Turmoil.
Turmoil.
Yeah, or
I
team
had
trouble,
wrote it
team
down.
turbulence, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, yeah, no, but I feel like, I mean, and I think this is a great spot to really talk about this because I think of multitasking as a me thing, but it turned into, in this case, a team thing, which was a big blind spot again for me, because I would be thinking, hey, if a leader's listening and they want to multitask, that's on them. It's not a harmful thing to other people around you. But I love the fact that in all of these, especially like decision deterioration can negatively affect others, your team turmoil can, and then communication breakdown. So really 3 out of the 4 are very outward. And so did you notice, was that surprising to you that it really all of a sudden transcended outside the individual and it started to, affect others around them?
It genuinely no, because we've known for a long time that leadership is a team sport.
Okay.
Leaders can't lead. If you don't have anybody with you, you're not a leader. You're an individual.
Right.
So what we try and focus our leaders on are the very practical contexts where these things are happening. So if we take that team turmoil and we just unpack it a little bit more, just to put some richness to it.
Yeah.
I'm a busy manager and I'm working on 16 different tasks at once. And then Dave comes to me and says, "Oh, Jimmy, I'm struggling with this thing. Can you help me?" So immediately Jimmy drops everything. It's like, "Right, Dave, let's get this thing solved." I'm starting to multitask. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I'm watching my emails flick up. So while I'm talking with Dave, I start to pick up my phone and I'm emailing some responses and texting. And I'm, oh God, I've got to talk to Rebecca about that thing that I forgot to tell her. So just give me 1 second. I'll go do that. And then I'll come
Yeah.
back. Well, immediately I've made Dave's problem mine. I haven't said to Dave, "Well, what do you think, Dave? How are you going to solve this?" I
Right.
haven't. I've just made it my own. So I've taken on another task.
Yeah.
Dave is starting to go, "Well, hold on. Jimmy's not giving me his full attention because he's busy emailing while we're having a conversation, and he's just left the room to go and deal with something." So is what I care about really meaningful to him at all? Do I even matter? And you can
Right.
see how the turmoil starts to happen, right?
Yeah.
And all I'm doing is taking on more tasks. I've said, well, I need to make this problem mine now and add it to my task list, and I've got to solve it because I'm the manager and I have to fix everything, as opposed to
Right.
saying, well, Dave, that's a really good point, and it's probably something that's really important to you, and I guess we need to solve this. What are your thoughts? Where have you got to so far? Tell me more.
Right. Yeah.
I'm consciously slowing down. Equally, Dave, not a good time right now because I just need to get this finished so I can look after Rebecca's concern. Give me 15 minutes and I'll come back to you and we'll spend half an hour
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. Wow. That's so powerful. And it's so hard because leaders want to help, right? We want to help people. So there's that little chunk of my brain going, hey, I really want to help. Number one. Number two, I love being needed. So there's that piece that it's feeding. But yet it really does potentially create an issue, especially, if you have to do something during that time. And I always laugh
Yeah.
because I think when I'm training, coaching, and somebody like, their phone rings or something, they're like, oh, I gotta take this. It's just like, whoa, really? I mean, I don't care if it's me, it doesn't matter. You're paying me either way. It's just the thought of what you're having to do and stop our meeting and then start this meeting. And then all of a sudden, all the energy, it takes us 5 to 10 minutes to get back to where we were
Back into
before.
flow. Yeah.
Right. So it's just, I mean, these are all blind spots. So that's what I love talking about this. And I'm so glad that you jumped on our show today because people just think that you live with burnout and people think you just live with multitasking and there is no option. There's no, like, I love the word. I never even heard of that, monotasking. I've never heard that before. So I'm hoping that people listening, obviously, are considering some alternative here. So I want to ask you, what does JBL high performance do in you? Where do you come in? If somebody's listening right now, Jimmy, and they're like, man, Jimmy's got my number. I need help with this. What does JBL High Performance do? How do you help alongside people?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So we partner with organizations in two specific areas. The first one is leadership development, and specifically we focus on leaders who are leading managers. So we know from our research that most organizations have a management 101 program. Congratulations, you're a team leader, you're a supervisor, you're a manager, go learn some management skills. Cool,
Right?
that's great. We also know that most organizations have executive coaching. So congratulations, you're a GM, you're a director, you're an SVP, go and have an executive coach. In the middle, you've got about 15 to 20 years of your career where there's not a whole lot going on for most organizations. And so you're
Yep.
relying on your management toolbox to lead. And
Right.
what we know is that when you start to lead managers, it's a very different skill set.
Sure.
Basically, you've moved away from being responsible for the people who do the work to being responsible for the people who are responsible for the people doing the work. So you're one
Sure.
step removed, and it requires a very, very different backpack of skills to
Gotcha.
to solve. So we work with organizations in that senior management layer and up, essentially, to help them transition from manager to leader and help
Oh,
them start thinking differently. So that's the first offering
sure.
we have.
Sure.
The more established, and that's reasonably new. We've been working on that for about 2 years.
Yeah.
The more established piece of work that we've been delivering into organizations globally for the last 7 years is what we call our Ways of Working program, and essentially it's a high performance teams program built around three core modules. And what we see is that nearly every team is struggling with 6 to 10 of the same problems everywhere you go, and we have a diagnostic that uncovers these.
Sure.
But we take a team through a process of alignment. Let's get everybody on the same page. Let's get everybody rowing in the same direction. Let's get everybody aware of what our priorities are. Let's learn to communicate more effectively. Then we accelerate the team. So these are the things you need to do to unwind the bad stuff and wind up the good stuff.
Hmm.
And then finally, we move into a process of high performance, sustained high performance. So, yes, you've had some fun times with Jimmy and his team, but you've got the rest of your careers together.
Sure.
So, how do we keep doing this beyond the end of the program? And we deliver that through a series of extremely interactive, whether virtual or in person, workshop environments. But we also have opportunities for social connection around those workshops. So we
Sure.
bring people back together to connect and share wisdom, share what they've learned. And we also have an AI mentor that is like a coach in your pocket or a mentor in your pocket that you can access, that is basically a clone of Jimmy and his team all smooshed into one application. And that's where you can get that kind of on the ground guidance at any point during the time we work together. And that program, that Ways of Working program, lasts for about 6 months, where we take
Okay.
teams through this massive transformation, alignment, acceleration, sustained high performance, and change the way they start to think, work, and operate together. And it's all
Sure.
very simple stuff, but the key is, can they do it? It's not necessarily easy. So we're there to support with accountability and helping them to understand and contextualize some of the stuff that we share into their environment and test and
Sure.
try and learn from it.
So does the Jimmy AI have an English accent like you do or not?
He's a bit more robotic than me. He's called Aiden. It's Aiden.
Yeah, there
And
you go.
yeah,
It's
he.
funny.
I would say he's far better dressed, probably more intelligent, and definitely has a better memory than me as I've aged into
Man,
my wisdom years.
when we got to start comparing ourselves to computers and robots and stuff, I think I'm tapping out. So that's awesome. A couple questions, and I'm going to let you go. What would your tip of the day be, Jimmy, for somebody listening? Maybe it's something that we covered you want to reiterate. Maybe it's something burning in your heart that you haven't shared yet. But what's one tip that you'd highly recommend for somebody listening?
It's probably something we haven't shared, and it's something that we used to we used to give this away. And so I'm going to give it away again today. It's probably the most impactful thing that, if you're a manager of a team, that you can do,
Sure.
and that's to clarify the purpose of your team. What do I mean by that? We've worked with hundreds of organizations and thousands of teams, And consistently, what we see is we go into an organization and we're like, how clear are we on our purpose as a team? And the team were like, oh, yeah, pretty clear. Yeah, 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 cool. And I'll give you one specific example. We worked with a sales team in a pharmaceutical business, and we said, what's the purpose of the team? How clear are we? And they were like, oh, yeah, pretty 100% clear. Yeah, we know exactly what we're doing. And I said, okay, grab a post-it note, everybody, write down what the purpose of the team is. Let's compare notes. And we had 15 different answers. We had make profit, drive revenue, build relationships, sell inventory. All of them were important, but they
Sure.
weren't aligned.
Yeah.
And what happens when you have a team that's not aligned on purpose is you've got people make their own priority decisions. They make their own resource calls. They put all their energy and effort into their belief of your purpose.
Yeah.
And so simply by getting everybody to write it down on a post-it note and talking about it and then coming up with one version, I guarantee you will improve the performance of your team. And so probably my tip of the day would be do that activity. It's in my book. It's in the first chapter, in the purpose chapter. And we literally give you the recipe for how to do that activity, but I've given you the free version there.
That's awesome. Well, and I would have never have, um, thought of that from what we were talking about, but clarify the purpose of your team is so powerful, especially like you said, most people have a different version, of what that means. And so if all I care about on the team, like in that spot, is to sell inventory, versus sell it at a profit versus, get what the customer wants. I mean, there's all these different ways to end at the same spot of thinking I sold something, whatever that means. So, that's fantastic. If people want to learn more about you, Jimmy, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Yeah, there's probably the two easiest ways. Go to jimmyburroughes.com, and in there you'll find our books, our podcasts. We have a weekly blog. There's a whole lot of information, and obviously you can reach out to us through the website. Equally, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I really enjoy conversations through LinkedIn, and we share something almost daily. So if there's something in there that piques your interest, drop a comment, reach out, let's have a chat. And from my perspective, as you can probably detect, I'm pretty passionate about this stuff. So I really enjoy conversations about performance, how to beat burnout, how to stop multitasking, and how to drive team engagement, which is the reality. The commercial imperative here is this is all about doing better business and making more money and having a better life. So
Sure.
if you've got an interest in any of those things, then let's connect and let's have a chat.
That's awesome. And you are kind enough to offer a free electronic version of Escape the Multitasking Trap. So there'll be a link from that. Thank you for that. You also mentioned there's some burnout tip sheets. So thank you. We'll put those in the show notes. And then there's a summer sale on your book, which is Beat Burnout. So if you want to grab a copy of that, please feel free to do so. There's just so much here. Jimmy, thank you so much for this. And for the listener, as we pretty much say every week, rather than jump into your next podcast, rather than jump into your next activity, why not just, kind of rethink what just happened? We invested about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and, this is his life story. This is his life passion. And whether it's, anxious, exhaustion, isolation, overwhelm, or unmotivated, whether it's that side or the four impacts of multitasking, chances are pretty darn high that we helped you in some way today. And again, it's easy to say, oh, that was great. Let me jump into my next thing. I really want you to sit with something, find something resonated with the listener today. So I just challenge you to really do something with that so that in a week from today and a month from today, you're a different person. If that happened, then you know what? The Positive Polarity Podcast and JBL High Performance today was a huge success because one person made a change in their life. So hopefully you take advantage of those offers that Jimmy gave us. Thank you so much, Jimmy, for hanging out with us. And I can't wait to download this book, Multitasking Trap. If I see stuff in there that I'm doing, I'm going to think you were stalking me because I'm guessing a lot of those things in there are things that I'm doing. So you'll probably hear from me again, wondering if you were like watching me because I'm sure
Please
I'm
do reach
guilty
out.
in
If it
as
resonates,
charged.
please do reach out because it helps us know that we're on track as well.
That's awesome. Yes, and anyone listening, grab a copy of those things, and if they do help you, let Jimmy know. again, I am an author as well. I love when somebody calls and says, "Oh my gosh, this really helped." It really is an encouragement. So, thank you again, Jimmy, for hanging out with us, and can't wait to keep learning from you.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.